Well, welcome to the September edition of the Self-Sufficiency Partner Call. We traditionally start at 2:05, so we're going to wait a couple more minutes before we get this really rolling, and people are still coming in. But we always like to start with songs, so I want to thank my colleagues here, Crystal, for picking that out. And while we're waiting, if you have any questions, just hit me up. But we really won't get started for a little bit yet. This is going to be an odd recording too, since we already started the recording. So that's just how we roll sometimes. Susan, it's nice to see you smile at that. All right. Well, I do have 2:05. So again, thank you for joining the September edition of the Self-Sufficiency Partner Call. I am James Barda, the Engagement Strategies Coordinator with Oregon Eligibility Partnership. And if you don't know already, Oregon Eligibility Partnership is a division within, or the program within ODHS that oversees the eligibility system. So we, help implement what the policy teams figure out in terms of getting people in the programs. So I'm delighted all of you can join us. We have, I'm hoping, an interesting educational program for you, but also I want to emphasize that we welcome your questions. And so as we get started, go ahead and put your information in the chat. It helps us know who all is here and gives us a better understanding. And so I actually prepared mine already. So I'm trying to model good behavior. So please put your information then. And looks like we're still waiting on our first guest to come by. But let me check on that. So in the meantime, since we're waiting on our first speaker, why don't take a moment. We've got 57 people in the room. And if someone can briefly talk about what they're hearing in their work in the community. I know you have opinions and observations to make, but I'm going to throw it open, which sounds dangerous, but actually is a good thing.
I don't mind going. I think one thing that I have heard from my families is that they are having a harder time accessing food resources. And also they are already encountering difficulty with getting scheduling COVID vaccines. And we have had confirmed cases of COVID within our center. So
when you say food resources, are you talking about like food bank, or are you talking about SNAP, or both? Okay.
SNAP the food banks with and I do know of at least a couple of families that did have their SNAP benefits reduced.
Huh, because that seems, that shouldn't be happening just yet. So, okay. Anyone else?
I'm sorry, James. I came in late. What was the question?
Oh, well, we're waiting for some of our first speakers, but I do see that one of them is right. But what I was asking the group is just to help us level set and say what you're hearing from the communities you're serving.
I am also hearing reductions in benefits, and I'm at Goodwill.
And when you say benefits, are you talking about
The SNAP
tax-
benefits.
SNAP benefits? That's interesting.
Yeah.
Here.
You know
But
if Merrick is has
I
participated?
see that
Do you know if he's used any hours at NARC already?
now I can feel the energy of people buzzing and thinking about some other things, but we do have one person here. Sam Khan, are you ready to speak at this point? I know I'm bringing you in early.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me okay? Yeah, I'm happy to introduce myself and speak, and I know that Mayora Solar was going to join as well to talk about SNAP. So hi everybody, if we haven't met, my name is Sam Khan, a she, her pronouns. I'm the Chief Data Officer at Oregon Department of Human Services. And I was asked to join today to talk about some of the data sharing, privacy and security concerns that folks are having related to SNAP data. And I do want to share a little bit about what we are working on at ODHS and also with our partners in the governor's office and Oregon Department of Justice. So I think many of you are aware that USDA made a request for an unprecedented amount of personal data for SNAP enrollees. So they asked for approximately 5.5 years of data that includes personal information like social security numbers, home addresses, and so forth. Oregon, along with 19 other states, filed a lawsuit saying that USDA was exceeding their statutory authority and violating federal privacy laws by expecting this data from states. So that's still ongoing. To date, Oregon has not shared the data that USDA requested. And we are in conversation with the other states, working as a coalition as part of this litigation. And just want to acknowledge the chilling effect that this is having in communities and the questions that I know people have, especially given that we've seen other federal agencies violate privacy laws by sharing data amongst federal agencies. So some folks here may also be aware that the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare share data unlawfully with the Department of Homeland Security, something that our state partners, our Oregon Health Authority partners are very concerned about. So just share that as an example of what's in the environment and why we are taking this so very seriously. So that's all I had prepared to share. I don't know if folks had any questions. I'm also happy to make space here for my colleague Mayora, if it's her time to be on the agenda.
Okay, well,
Thanks,
I
James.
know people have security questions, or at least
You're welcome to
concerns.
drop it in the chat too if you don't want to come off mute. It's fine. Oh, I see that Misha. Is it Marie or Misha? I'm sorry.
And then I hope
I'm lucky enough to have two first names. So my actual first name is Misha. My last name is Marie, but yeah, it gets confusing. So I've got a lot of folks concerned about having to do the re-eligibility more often for benefits, and I don't know if this is going to if this is also happening to SNAP folks, people who are receiving SNAP benefits, but I work with a lot of people who have expected to be lifelong disabilities, and they're really concerned about the new requirements that are looming in terms of having to do re-eligibility processes a lot more often. I don't know if you can speak to that, or if you know any more about that question.
So that one's a little bit outside my domain. I'm wondering, Maora, James, others, if you have thoughts.
Hi, I am Maora and I manage Oregon SNAP program. And so is your question specifically in regards to folks who have a federal or state identified disability, who are hoping to not have to meet work requirements in order to continue receiving SNAP benefits? Okay, so nodding yes. So that has not changed. So for SNAP, and I can go into specific HR1 updates that we've been told from August 29th and September 4th memos. They've been a little bit slow on the sharing of memos, but we do have a couple now. And the provisions do not change who is considered a, in air quotes by the federal, able-bodied adult. So able-bodied adult still excludes individuals who have a federally or state defined disability, are receiving benefits, or perhaps they're not receiving a payment, but they are recognized as, for example, Social Security as having a disability, but they may not be receiving payment on it. So that has not changed. Those folks are still excluded, can still receive SNAP benefits ongoing without having to meet that 80-hour a month work requirement. So that's a great important question. And that is the SNAP answer only. So just to make that clear.
All right. Well, Sam, I guess you're off the hook for now. But like she said, if you have further security questions, feel free to put them in the chat. But we'll throw the spotlight over to Maora, and indeed to talk about federal changes, namely HR1.
Thank you so much, James, and thank you everyone who is here. Hopefully we have some of our people from our food programs community partner meeting. I do see a few individuals who are usually there, so thank you for joining us. As we were told in mid to late August, we did get a few, or a couple, I guess, if I'm being true to language, we received 2 federal memos in regards to HR1 for SNAP. One memo was, I will say, a bit unclear on some provisions. So we have sent the federal government some follow-up questions on that. We have not received a response. However, the memo received on August 29th does go in depth of detail for the changes for energy assistance recipients. I'm going to dig into that a little bit, and I will also put language in the chat after I go into it so that you can see it in writing. I prefer writing for understanding, and I want to make sure I honor both ways of understanding and capturing information. So one thing I want to make very clear from the beginning is that every SNAP household paying for heating or cooling separate from their shelter cost will continue to get the full utility allotment. Receiving the full utility allotment increases your deductions and almost always increases someone's SNAP allotment. So that is not changing. Again, everyone who is paying heating or cooling separate than their housing will continue to get FUA, and usually that will increase their SNAP allotment. What is changing is now the federal government has split groups receiving energy assistance and not paying for their heating and cooling separately into 2 different groups. Group 1 are households with someone who has a disability, or someone who is age 60 or older in their SNAP group. For that group, what will happen for them is if they receive energy assistance, they will continue to receive the full utility allotment. Our data shows it's an average of an extra $58 of SNAP a month, which is a huge difference. It's about $600 a year. In addition, the energy assistance payment they get will not count against their SNAP benefits. It will not be counted as income. And lastly, they will get a deduction for the utility that energy assistance is paying for. So those are 3 different benefits that will continue for households who do have someone 60 or older or with a disability in their SNAP group. However, for groups without someone 60 or older or with a disability in their SNAP group, they are now penalized in 3 ways. So the first is they will no longer receive the full utility allotment based on receiving energy assistance. So again, that would be an average decrease of about $58 in SNAP a month. Secondly, those households will have the energy assistance payment counted against their SNAP as unearned income. And thirdly, they will not receive a deduction for that utility that the energy assistance is covering. So it is a triple whammy for those groups. Oregon is not, well, let me pause. Are there questions about those? And again, after I'm done speaking about all the HR1 stuff that we know, I will put this in the chat because it's important and it's important to have it in writing.
Trista.
So yes, Trista, individuals who are experiencing homelessness and sleeping in their car would still be able to claim their gas as heating expense. That has not been changed by HR1. Great question. I'm just waiting. I don't see any other questions. I don't think. Oh, Sharon.
So is there somewhere we can get this in writing so we can share it? Can we get that explains all this? It's complicated and different folks. I mean, I have a lot of people coming in here who are scared about what's happening to their SNAP in different situations, and I need a document to use to explain the different situations.
Absolutely. So I
Okay.
will say that SNAP policy quite a while ago did create a document for community partners. Right now, because there's so much concern, visibility, and involvement around HR1, it's taking a bit longer than usual for us to get approval for releasing documents.
Okay.
But have been, and our deputy director just talked to me today about our strategy for getting those approved so that we can send them out. What our desire, because our understanding is that the federal government will be continuing to release memos on HR1 little by little in the coming weeks. And so what we would like to do and what I've proposed and what a lot of folks seem to enjoy or think that that's a great idea is that we will release and update that document on a weekly basis. And we'll point out what the changes are. We will let people know and put in links of the federal documents. The federal documents are often very high level, but we want to make sure people have the source material. But our hope is that we will continue to do that so people understand what we know and when we know it on a regular cadence. And we would also make it explicitly clear if there are no updates from the last week. So we are working on that, and we've heard people loud and clear. And I've worked on escalating that ask so we can get that document released very soon. Are there any other questions about that provision? Because if not, I will work into the work requirements changes, which are also very big. And I'm looking at time. I think we're good. Yes, Sharon, or your hand is still up. Sharon, do you have another question?
Sharon? I guess we move on.
Okay, I'll assume not. Okay, so for the work requirements, I'm probably gonna call them work rule. That's easier on my diction. So for the work rules, there are 3 big changes happening under HR 1. The first impacts the whole state. So for the whole state, Oregon historically has qualified for waivers for areas. We usually and historically have asked for waivers based on 2 breakdowns of areas. One is by county, the other is by tribal land. What we've been able to get waivers for is based on lack of available jobs. So if a county or tribal land had a certain percentage of a lack of available jobs, we could ask that every person between the ages of 18 and 54 did not have to meet the work rules in order to continue getting their benefits, because there's simply not enough jobs within their community to even allow them to fulfill the work rules. Unfortunately, HR 1 has removed that waiver ability. HR 1 now requires a state to base their waiver of an area on 10% or more of an unemployment rate. Oregon went over that in our session, like 2007, 2009 timing, but barely popped over that and went right under. We are not able to reach 10% for any county. Any of our 36 counties. We believe we might be able to reach that 10% in a few of our tribal lands. We are waiting for data, and if it shows that it's over 10%, we will submit that to the federal government so that individuals who are residing on those tribal lands are waived from having to meet the work requirements. So that is one of the many ways ABOD work rules are changing. Are there questions on that? Because there are a couple other ways. Okay, I don't see him here. I'm going to continue on. The second, is there an expansion of the individuals who have to be evaluated to see if they have to meet the work rules? Currently, it's individuals ages 18 through 54. Once you turn 55, you do not have to meet the work rules. FNS has expanded it to individuals ages 18 through 64, expanding the age range by 10 years. Individuals upon their 65th birthday no longer have to meet work rules. So that is the second way that ABOD is expanding. So Annie, I see your question and I will answer that at the end because I don't want to confuse people, but that is a great question. The third way that work rules are expanding is that under previous law, individuals who had anybody in their SNAP group, it didn't matter if they were related to them at all, but if there was anyone in their SNAP group who was ages 0 through 17, they would not have to meet the work rules. HR 1 has changed that. Only individuals who are in a SNAP group with a child under age 14 no longer have to meet the work rules. So again, it's restricting and reducing the age of the child that makes someone not have to meet work rules. And lastly, HR 1 changed who receives an exemption. So there are a few different populations that under previous law qualified for an exception no matter what. That meant that they never had to meet the work rules. They could continue receiving their SNAP benefits. That group was those experiencing homelessness, those who were a veteran, and those who were a former foster care youth, I believe age 24 and under. All of those exemptions have been removed under HR 1. The exemptions for HR 1 that have been added are those who meet the criteria of Indian, Urban Indian, and California Indian. again, the 3 exemptions that existed before of experiencing homelessness, being a veteran, or former foster care youth no longer apply under HR 1, and those are replaced by Indian, urban Indian, and California Indian. And I want to make clear that is federal language. So our understanding of our data is that in June of 2025, there were 310,626 folks ages 18 through 65 without a child under the age of 14 in their staff group. We pulled through the age of 65 because HR 1 was unclear on where the age capped, so we wanted to overestimate instead of underestimate. However, we expect that a large population of individuals will have to be screened to see if they meet. Sorry, it's my dog. To see if they meet any work requirements, if they are already working, or if there is some kind of an exemption like the disability that we have not identified yet. But that is a large workload for staff, and that is a brand new conversation that many people have never had to have with SSP. So I want to give time for people to kind of metabolize that information. And also I'm going to look at the chat real quick. Okay, Trista, I see, well, Annie, I'm setting your question aside. I see it. I'm not ignoring you. I just want to make sure I don't confuse people with HR 1 changes and other changes. So for the when do these work requirements go into effect? The memo that we received from FNS said that they went into effect July 4th. However, the state needs time to implement the changes. And so we have reached out to FNS for more guidance about how to implement these changes. But in the document, it does say that they became effective on July 4th when HR 1 was passed. I'm reading the next question. Antonio added information. Thank you so much, Antonio. Can people do volunteer work to meet the requirements? How are people expected to prove their work hours? So that one is a bit more in depth. Antonio, do you want to talk about work hour tracking? I don't know if you want to take that, but I know that you are our AVA expert.
Hi, Mira. Let me know if you can hear me, please.
Yes, absolutely.
So individuals who are meeting the work requirements on their own or who are doing the volunteer activities on their own can provide us with verification from the agency, employment, or place that they're doing these work activities through. So the third party that they're doing the the work activities through can provide that verification for them, and that information can come to us, and we'll put it into their case. If they are not doing work activities or doing enough to meet the work requirements, then we can refer them to Oregon Employment Department, who is our contractor and who is charged with creating a plan to assist individuals in meeting those work activities. And then, of course, we're always screening people for exemptions. I heard you discussing the health reasons. So I just wanted to add to that part that it doesn't have to be a disability, or it doesn't have to be something to that extent. The SNAP definition of health issues that impact their physical ability, behavioral health, mental health, any of those reasons are allowed per our rules to exempt people from having to meet these work requirements. And in order not to create barriers, we do not request verification of those exemptions. So I just wanted to add those pieces. There's exemptions that we take verbal attestation. If a person reports that information and and we're able to enter it into their case information, then we're able to keep them from having to meet the work requirements and be penalized for not doing 80 hours of work activities. And I believe you asked a different question, so if you don't mind repeating any other questions that I may have missed.
We can also, I know we had 20 minutes on this agenda, so what we might end up doing so that we don't do a hostile or intention takeover of your agenda is to have people continue to put the questions in the chat, and we can provide a written document that answers all of them. And as Antonio pointed out, well, the delicate balance for sharing HR1 information is there's all this stuff that's pre-existing and will continue. For example, with the utilities, people who are paying their heating and cooling separate than the rent, that's continued, that's not changing. So there's a complex information of sharing and training on who does have to meet work rules in general and who doesn't in general, and those policies that are not changing along with the complexity of what is changing. So we can also in the document make it really clear what is not changing and who does not have to meet those work rules or who is exempt from the work rules based on standing law that has not changed, and then make it clear what is changing. So we're trying to balance that tension of too much information, not enough information, and also making sure you guys know making sure you all know how to support the individuals in the communities that come to you for guidance.
Mayor, I want to point out that we anticipated this being a relatively hot topic, and Sam already talked about data security, so we're happy to have you as much as you're willing to be here.
Okay. So let me, I want to scroll up a little bit. So, I guess to backtrack and highlight what Antonio was just talking about, there are standing ways that someone or standing reasons that someone does not, or that makes someone not required to meet the work rules. So for one is if you are a student. And so for that one, there's a question about for 18-year-olds, is there any difference in ABOD status based on whether they're still in high school or not? So those provisions haven't changed. So the multiple ways that people can meet those work rules or not have to be required to meet work rules, those have not changed outside of what we've talked about. So outside of that special exemption for the veteran, for homelessness, and for former foster youth. And we can put that into writing because I want to make sure people are really clear on who would have to start. I think it's who would have to start meeting work requirements, who would have to continue meeting work requirements, and who no longer will have to meet work requirements. I think that's really what's going on and what makes it so complicated. Looking through. So to address, there was a question earlier by Annie. Has it expanded to all counties or just 6 counties? So we unfortunately have kind of a domino of different changes as it happens to ABOD, because as you all know, or most of you know, definitely our food community partners know, that effective September 1st, we were no longer able to apply what's called a discretionary exemption to the residents of the 6 counties that were all receiving discretionary exemptions. So that expansion to those 6 counties, that is just between September 1 and December 31, because our waiver from the federal government that allows us to waive areas based on lack of available jobs, that doesn't end until December 31st. So it is upon January 1 that we lose our waiver of the lack of available job areas. Annie, does that answer your question?
I think, yeah, just trying to understand the timeline of what started September 1st in 6 counties, and then when these impacts will hit the rest of the state. But I think the timeline for the whole thing is still a little confusing.
For good reason, we agree. It is
Um,
really the waiver that allows people in the 30 counties to not have to meet any work rules in order to keep getting SNAP. That doesn't end until December 31st. So really, those 30 counties are safe in a lot of ways from HR 1 until January 1st because of that waiver that's in place still. Antonio,
Antonio?
do you want to add anything else to the waiver question? Because I know you're our waiver.
Yeah, I was gonna add that the Oregon waiver follows the calendar year. And so it is our understanding that our current waiver will be allowed to go to its conclusion before the new threshold of 10% unemployment rates gets considered when we make our new waiver request. So right now we're in the process of making a new waiver request with the understanding that in order to waive the work requirements starting January for any areas, those areas need to meet the 10% unemployment threshold. And so based on the data that we saw month ago, none of the counties meet that threshold. However, there's some tribal lands that may still be eligible to be waived. And so we're going to submit a waiver for the calendar year 2026. But we expect that none of our counties are going to be waived and only tribal areas. And so that means that people residing in any of the waived areas will not have to meet the work requirements. But, that will definitely be a very small percentage compared to what our current waiver allows. So, and just to clarify, the waiver, the calendar waiver, is for where people live in. The exemptions, those can be applied to anyone regardless of where they reside. So it's always a good idea for anyone in any of the counties to report that they meet any of the exemptions for this very reason, that the counties tended to change every year, but the exemption reasons will follow them in their case, so as to not apply the work requirements.
Thank you so much. That's so helpful. One quick follow-up question, if I may, to uplift in the chat, Sammy's question around grace period. Am I understanding that response right to say then in the current 6 counties, starting November 1st, these new policies around exemptions and ages, that's when we can expect them to start?
So Antonio, jump in if you want to too, but I will say, when the federal government says we're supposed to implement things is sometimes different than when we are actually able to implement things based on our systems. We have to make changes in systems. We have to send out notices and give people timely notice. And so we are working with our operations partners to keep them informed. We just got out of a meeting with FNS, and it's a challenge because, for example, we still have not received any guidance on non-citizen SNAP changes or any clarification. And at the meeting that happened at 1 o'clock today, they let us know to please wait for FNS guidance before we implement it. However, in our guidance that we have received so far, it said that we were supposed to implement these changes on July 4th. So states are in a very odd position right now. Because when Congress passed HR 1 in this way, it didn't really take into account that traditionally these things happen future forward. And so we might know in July that these policies were changing in December, and know that effective December 1, we had 120 days from December 1 for our hold harmless period. That is not happening here. What is happening here is in the written guidance, it's saying that in July 4th, that is when this became effective. And your hold harmless period begins when your state implements the change. And the hold harmless period ends on November 1. So the hold harmless period is a little bit different than when states are actually able to implement based on their system constraints, notice requirements, administrative rules, and whatnot. What we have been told is that states absolutely would get no hold harmless period after November 1st. What hold harmless truly means is that if quality control were to hold a case, that there would not be an error cited if we didn't follow HR1 for that case. That is really all hold harmless means. I did want to call out, there was a question, Emma said upstairs, there's an earlier question here about volunteering. So yes, in rule, we make very clear that folks can do paid or unpaid work. So that could be volunteer or paid work of 80 hours a month. I think one of the biggest restrictions is that there's only a very small percentage or a part of the 80 hours that can be job search. And that has some specific parameters, but those 80 hours do need to be worked for pay or unpaid work as a volunteer. See if we have more questions. Rebecca,
Miora,
the changes in writing. Yes, Antonio.
the only thing I wanted to add was that the experience that people are going to have with the exemptions that are going away is going to differ depending on when we're seeing them. Once this policy gets implemented, new people who have not received SNAP benefits in the past, we're not allowed to use the new exemption reason or the exemption reasons that are going away. But if their cases are open and they have used those exemption reasons, based on the guidance that they gave us for the previous changes that have occurred, we're allowed to keep those exemption reasons until the end of their until when they have to renew their case. So I think the experience that people are going to have is going to differ based on where they are at in regards to their SNAP case, when it got open or when it will begin and when it comes to renewal. So I want to be careful and make sure that we understand that it's not going to look the same for everybody. And the same thing with the age requirements. If people were already receiving SNAP benefits, we may not be needing to implement the work requirements for them until we see them again, even though the policy may have already started. So once we have this information clarified, and once we know what each scenario is going to look for the different population types, we'll update our website and ensure that people have a correct understanding of how these changes impact them.
That's a
So
really important call out, and I'm glad you spoke up, Antonio. So in a nutshell, what he's saying is that Oregon has not, I've heard nothing to indicate that Oregon is going to do what's called a mass change. That as of November 1st, everyone is going to have their SNAP allotment and eligibility redetermined based on HR1. What we have heard and what has been allowed so far in the written FNS memos is that states have a choice to implement HR1 as the case and the individual is recertified. So that will allow kind of a more gradual shift throughout the state. And when someone is recertifying, so they might see quite a shift between their work requirements or their eligibility between their previous recertification and when they renew. We definitely expect that for non-citizen populations. If FNS says that the loss of eligibility happens at renewal. So someone might have applied in March of 2025 under pre-HR1 laws and been a refugee, certified for 12 months. And then when they are recertified in March of 2026, most likely, given our reading of HR1, might receive a denial saying that their immigration status does not qualify them for SNAP. But what we do not anticipate doing, and what I have not heard of yet, is that we would, for example, send a notice to all individuals who don't meet qualifying citizenship criteria that their benefits are closing as of October 31st. That's not something that Oregon has even discussed or suggested at this time. Recertification happens. So Oregon has chosen a 12-month standard recertification. And then for households that have no earned income and all the adults in the group either have a disability or who are age 60 or older, those groups get a 2-year, 24-month certification. So for Oregon, it's either 12 or 24 months. It's a great question. So SNAP recipients who fall under work requirements as of today have not been notified of their need to work if they newly need to meet work requirements based on HR1. We will have to write those notices, identify the households, and make sure they're properly informed. So I do know that that's a step that needs to happen, as well as we'll need to screen folks to see if they meet those criteria. We will put this in writing and it is in rule, but what HR1 has not changed is many different ways that someone does not have what's called a countable month. And some of those ways are if their benefits are prorated. So if someone's applying September 5th and they're getting less than a month of benefit, that will never be a countable month. Well, never unless FNS changes it. They have not changed it at this point. That is still not a countable month. Another is if they are pregnant. So an individual who's pregnant would not receive a countable month, regardless of whether they were meeting work goals or not. Or if as Antonio pointed out, if they are declaring themselves, we do not require verification that they have a disability or some kind of a medical situation, which could include mental health, that prevents them from being employed. So there are a number of different ways, and we will ensure that those ways are sent out. And we'll also make sure that we cite the rules that have that information. These are pre-HR1 rules, but we will also make sure to call out which sections have not been changed by HR1. So, Antonio, are there any questions we haven't addressed, or James? Is there any of that?
I was just going to throw the question out to the group. Has your question been answered in the chat? Or has anyone rather not had their question answered in the chat? Did we miss one? Sharon?
Oh, the other half of my question, and I guess it leads me to another one. If they've not been notified yet, are they still going to get their September benefits?
So folks who are eligible for SNAP, unless they haven't applied yet, have already received September benefits.
Right. Okay.
In the first to the 10th.
And then is there a system in place for nonprofits who are allowing these people to volunteer to report? Is there going to be is it going to be a form they have to turn in? Is it something we have to turn in? Do we know yet how that, and this is a heavier work requirement than ABOD requirements before, right?
No, 80 hours is the standard expectation.
It was, okay. Well, I see our organization, I mean, we're a small organization with 1.75 staff. So this is going to be another reporting requirement that we have to fulfill. And I'm concerned about how we're going to fulfill that requirement.
This is for your clients who are volunteers?
Yeah, we have a food pantry, we have a children's closet, we have a gleaning program, we have a community garden. So we have a lot of opportunities for people to volunteer. That's for sure. But the reporting requirements are gonna be the thing. It's one thing to have them sign in on a volunteer sheet, but I'm gonna need to know who and where do I report it to? Or do they get to self-report?
That's a great question, Sharon. Antonio, has the ABOD team currently talked about like tracking forms for individuals? I know OED is a part of our tracking, which is one of the great things about being a pledged state. I don't know if we have really pinned those parts down yet, and if so, I would love for you to share.
If someone um, so this will differ depending on the person's experience or situation. If someone is volunteering on their own and they are working with a community partner that is allowing them to do volunteer hours, and they provide us a letter with those hours will be entered into their case, and then no additional information will be required other than reporting to us when their hours fall below the 20 hours per week. If they're not doing hours on their own, then they will be referred to Oregon Employment Department, who will help them create a case plan that will allow them to complete the hours that are needed to reach the 80-hour threshold. So when they create a case plan with OED, then OED is in charge of managing those hours and what activities are allowed. But again, let's say that they're doing 10 hours of volunteer a week, that will put them at 40 hours a month. Then they would be referred to OED for the balance of the 40 hours so that they're able to reach the 80 hours. But again, we can take these questions down and put guidance on the website so that people so that we have a permanent place where they can see the answers to these questions. So, but does that help?
Well, is OED gonna have a list of nonprofits where they can get volunteer hours if there aren't work opportunities in their community? I mean, I've worked in every county in the state in my career. And I know there are places in the state, once this goes statewide, there are places where there aren't work opportunities. They're few and far between. So is there gonna be a listing of nonprofits or somehow or another registered with OED?
So that is not necessary. Again, if the person, as they're applying for SNAP benefits, if they are told that they are required to do the work activities, they can provide us a letter from wherever they're participating, and that information will be case noted into their case. If in the letter it says that they're meeting the 80 hours, that's all they need to do. They don't need to provide any other information. We don't need to get an official listing of a volunteer site. There's other ways other than volunteers to be able to complete these hours. So for example, Oregon allows bartering. So if someone is working in exchange for rent, all they have to do is provide a letter from the person they are bartering with, indicating that they're doing work activities with them, and those are enough to meet the 80-hour threshold. If they're not enough, then again, they will get a referral to OED so that they can help them complete the balance of those hours. But there's no need for us to maintain a list of approved sites per se, because volunteer experiences vary and what they look like and how they get organized. The only difference is that we do not that we don't organize the volunteer activity. So those are things that individuals are doing on their own. But anything that gets referred to OED, that's where they get assistance through they call them a SNAP coach. They go through their own personal information, see what are things that where are they at in terms of employment. So do they need training? Do they need to take classes? Do they need to enroll in certificate programs? They will work with the individual to find out what is needed for their own. And I see that, Jennifer, I don't mean to call you out, Jennifer Granera, but if there's anything you would like to add, please jump in regards to this question.
Antonio, I think you covered it beautifully. Thank you. I don't have anything to add.
Thank
I,
you.
I want to just say that, we're close to end of time, but there was a couple other questions in the chat. If Mayora, if you want to hit those quickly.
Yeah. So first, since it's work requirement related, Annie, I will just say we received our first letter really telling us about work requirements on August 29th. So we as an agency are scrambling to review, to analyze, to reach out to FNS, to ask clarifying questions for parts in that memo that were still unclear or that conflicted with the September 4th memo they reached out. So really, I do want to share, we absolutely understand that this is a bit confusing, but our options were to kind of not share what we know yet, or to share, step out bravely, say this is what we know, and we'll keep you informed as we know more, and thought that the latter was a better option. Again, we had a meeting with FNS, our regional, and it was very clear that national FNS is who's providing all the guidance. So they weren't even willing or able to answer our questions on HR1. So we are asking those questions continuously and consistently, along with all other states in the nation, and sharing this information out as soon as we get it. Sammy, I also don't want to skip your very important question. So here's the pain point that we're in is when Oregon is able to implement these changes in the one system is different than whether FNS chooses to hold individuals accountable for any administrative error over payments. Just want that to sink in. That is very important, and that's something Oregon is trying to be very aware and careful of. When an agency does not issue out benefits in accordance with federal law, that can be an agency error overpayment, which for SNAP, the clients still have to pay. So we want to be really careful about this information. It might be that individuals still would get their benefits if we do not receive information from USDA by the time that they recertify, but we might then get notification from USDA that we have to pursue those individuals for an overpayment. We are in a very new world. States all over the nation have not really been in a situation like this. And so we are continuing to reach out to FNS about what do we do for fair hearings? How do we deal with the quality control reviews? How do we implement these things retroactively if you're just giving us our very first memo August 29th? So we are continuing to ask those questions, but we will not be able to implement HR1 until it's in the system. So that's, I think, one of the biggest takeaways. HR1 right now is not in the one system. We are meeting with OEP to figure out what needs to happen to get it into the one system, but it is, as I speak, not in the one system at all. So that's a really important takeaway, and we can also provide more written guidance. And I know we're over 3 o'clock, but I really appreciate this. I do want to say that SNAP is holding our regular food programs community partner meeting for the month of September. And so we will continue to share and focus on HR1 for that meeting. James, I can send you that invitation if you want to send it to your registered list here for folks who are interested and aren't part of our regular listserv for that meeting. Thank you for your attendance. Thank you for your important questions. Thank you for helping us figure out how to get these really hard changes and messages out to a community in a humane, caring way. This is going to be tough, but we appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Mayora, Antonio, Sam, all of you participating. Wendy, I see you had another question. We'll get back to you in writing. And again, I want to respect everyone's time. So keep these questions coming and we will strive to get you answers. So thank you so much for your work.